Hello. Hi. Oh God, the music. Okay, hold on. Can we get the music? I know it's look. I know it's in a quiet spot right now, but like it does need to. See, it's getting louder. Can we get it turned down? Can we get it turned? Yep. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate. Okay, it's still maybe a little bit. Can you crank it just a bit more? Okay, cool. I think we're golden. Hello. Welcome to the Sharkstream book club. It's me. It's Gage. It's Gage. My phone thought I was talking to it. Stop that. But hello. We're reading more Dead Space Martyr today. Golly gee whiz. Has it already been a week? Question mark? It's gonna be another short one today. Last week we read about half of part 5. And this week we will be continuing to the end of part 5, of which there are a number of short chapters and a couple kinda longer ones. But still should be plenty for us to discuss with regards to what sort of events are going to be happening. As you may remember last time, let me... I'm re-reminding myself here. So, last time, what happened was Isaac went down in the bathyscaphe. Or, Isaac, Christ. Altman. Ya boy, Michael Altman, went down a few more times in the bathyscaphe. And ultimately went on the final excursion to track down the previous bathyscaphe that had, of course, gotten stuck down there after Dantec and Hennessy died. Remember when that happened? That was nuts. Now, Altman managed to convince them, hey, I'm going to need a couple things, up to and including a tranquilizer gun in case my co-pilot goes fucking nuts. And they were nice enough to let him have a tranquilizer gun. Mitty, please don't sink your claws into my leg. Mitty's in my lap. She's been laying there for a little bit now. It's very cute. It did require me to ask one of my roommates to go grab my energy drink for this stream, because cat in lap. I can't just force her to move, you know? That wouldn't be nice. She's so comfortable. Why would I ever think of doing that to my lovely daughter? But alas for Altman, I believe on not on the excursion that they actually retrieve the other bathyscaphe, but I think on the one after that. What ends up happening is he ends up going down with a guy who's got like this weird box that's taking indeterminate, undescribed readings, but this guy manages to conceive his complete complete nutso bonkersness until the very last moment, at which point he completely fucking loses it and attacks Altman, destroys the oxygen supply, and tries to open up the sub to allow the water to come rushing in. Altman has to kill that guy, because if he doesn't, then he's not going to be able to survive the trip back because there would be 2 people using up oxygen, and then he passes out on the way back up. But what's most notable about this is that, in part because of seemingly the lack of oxygen fucking with his head, he is now seeing hallucinations. So, you know, that's fun. And we last left him lying in a hospital bed, having successfully survived the trip back. And now it's time to see what else fate has in store for our good buddy Michael Altman, who I'm sure nothing bad will ever happen to ever again. Chapter 45. After nearly dying in the bathscaff, it was as if he was living a different life, as if the world he had known had become overlapped by another ghostly one. He began to see more people whom he knew to be dead: his father, sister, a teacher he'd been close to who had committed suicide, an old friend killed by a car in high school. They would appear, looking nearly as real as anybody, and offer vague and sometimes puzzling messages. Some spoke against convergence, urging him to hurry and focus your attention correctly, as one of them put it, before it was too late. Others spoke of unity, suggesting to him that it was somehow too late, that he had misused the resources given him and showed no signs of learning from his mistakes. All urged him to leave the marker alone. He told Ada about seeing her mother. At first it made her angry, and then it made her cry, but then a few hours later she asked him to tell her about the experience in detail. "But why you?" she asked. "Why not me?" A day later he woke up in the middle of the night to find Ada staring at him. "I saw her," she said, her face radiant, "like a vision. She was as real as you or me. She was standing right over there near the door." "What did she tell you?" "That she loved me, and that we needed to leave the marker alone, to forget we ever found it. It must be dangerous, or powerful, anyway. What do you think the marker is?" He explained to her what he knew, described the way the marker had looked underwater. "It's all connected," she said. "The stories in town, these visions we're having, the artifact in the center of the crater, I'm sure of it." At first she was ecstatic about seeing her mother. It had been, Altman realized, an almost religious experience for her in a way that it hadn't been for him. For the rest of the night she was manic, elated, but by the next morning her mood had begun to turn. She was moody, depressed. "Why can't she be here all the time?" she asked. "Why can't she stay with me?" "But it's not her," said Altman. "It seems like her, but it isn't. It's a hallucination." "It was her," said Ada, with a sense of conviction that worried him. "And I need her. I need her back." And just when Ada was at her most depressed and listless, her mother came back. Altman was in the room at the time, beside her, and saw it as well. Only what he saw was not her dead mother, but his own dead sister. They both agreed that something had happened, but had experienced it differently. They were each shown whomever they wanted to see. The words spoken were different as well, phrased to fit the way the person herself spoke when she was alive. But it all, with a little interpretation, fit into the idea of one crowning event: convergence, though the dead were less clear about what exactly that was or what could be done to stop it. Altman was suspicious. "It's not real," he tried to tell Ada. "We're being manipulated, used." "I know what I saw," said Ada. "It was as real as anything I've ever seen." She wanted her mother back from the dead so much that she wouldn't listen. It was strange, Altman thought, that the hallucination, or vision as she called it, was constant for her, always her mother, when his kept changing from one loved one to another. But perhaps it was simply because he was too skeptical to accept the hallucinations as anything but delusion, and so it had to keep trying different strategies. As he'd been ordered, Altman told Stevens about his hallucinations, mentioning Ada's as well. Stevens just recorded what he said and nodded. He seemed tired, overworked. "What do you think it all means?" Altman asked. Stevens shrugged. "You and your girlfriend are not the only ones having them," he said. "Others are experiencing the same thing, and more frequently. Only dead people, loved ones, the sort of people that you'd want to take seriously. Some people like you believe they're hallucinations. Others, like Ada, believe there's something more." Accidentally hit my mic, readjusting myself in my chair. "Whatever it is, it wants us to do something," Altman said, "but it doesn't know how to communicate it properly." "Not only that," said Stevens, in one of his rare moments of openness, "our hospital ward is full of people suffering from psychosis, and the suicide rate is sky high. Either it wants a lot of us mad and dead, or what it's saying is literally destroying us. There was, he noticed, a shift, and I got a text message. 1 second. Okay. Hello, Wild Haiti. Welcome to the Sharkstream. Okay, where was I? There was, he noticed, a shift in the way people interacted with one another aboard the floating compound. There was a growing feeling that something was happening, something that they couldn't begin to understand. Some people began clumping together in groups, sharing their experiences with the dead, speculating that the boundaries between heaven and earth had been broken. Others dismissed them as a function of the signal emitted by the marker, similar to a drug trip. Others, I have like a stack of like games and book right in front of me that is like fucking up with my spatial awareness. So I'm going to put those aside for right now. Others seemed to be having a bad trip. They became withdrawn, confused, even violent. He was in the laboratory, charting the moments when the signal pulse was strongest, trying to see if his hallucinations were occurring at those same times, when he noticed through the open door people rushing down the hall. He stepped out to get a better look, saw at the far end, against the door, surrounded by a crowd now, a scientist named Martyr, someone he didn't know very well. He had a laser scalpel in one hand, very close to his own throat. "Now, Martyr," another scientist was trying to say, "put the scalpel down." "Stay away," Martyr shouted. His eyes were wild, darting about in his head. "Just keep your distance. You're with them, I know it." "Who's them, Martyr?" the man asked. "Put the scalpel down, and I'm sure we can sort this all out." "Go get the guards," someone said, but Martyr overheard. "No guards!" he shouted, and lunged forward, cutting two of his friend's fingers with the laser scalpel. The man screamed and fell backward, and Martyr turned in a circle, brandishing the scalpel until everyone stood at a little distance from him. He brought the scalpel back to his throat. "It's too late," he hissed. "We're all dead, or good as dead. We cannot escape. Get out now before you become one of them." And suddenly, with a swift, vicious movement, he whipped a scalpel through his neck. The wound was bloodless at first, slightly cauterized by the scalpel, but then the blood began to pulse, a thick jet of it spurting from his severed carotids. He gave a ghastly, gurgling scream, the air hissing strangely from his mouth and from his slit windpipe, and then took a step forward and collapsed. A few moments later, guards were there, covering up the body and hustling everyone away. "What happened?" Altman asked one of the scientists passing by. "Martyr went crazy," the man said. "He started screaming in the lab about the end of the world, and then he stabbed Westerman through the arm with a broken pipette. He grabbed that laser scalpel and ran here." "But why?" The man shrugged. "Who knows?" he said. "It's just like when that guard shot a technician last week for no reason, then shot himself. These things just happen." He sometimes found himself on the edge of a group, listening to them expounding. The focus was usually on the marker, the name that Altman had learned to call it from his hallucinations, having caught on with the others as well. Altman didn't know who had first suggested that the marker was the product of alien technology, but the idea had caught on quickly, and now many of the researchers in the facility were convinced of it. There was a good deal of speculation about the originators of the marker, why it had been left there, what it meant, and whether they should tamper with it or leave it alone. One day, on his way from his room down to the submarine bay, he found the hallway blocked. 6 or 7 people were gathered in the hallway, a group consisting of both scientists and guards. One of the 6, an older scientist, addressed the others. When he saw Altman coming, he fell silent. "Excuse me," said Altman, and slowly pushed through, the people shuffling out of the way and allowing him to squeeze past. It was strange. He was sure interrupting something, but wasn't sure what. Mutiny, maybe? The answer came when, just as he reached the edge of the group, the scientist began to speak again. "You must free your flesh and unify with the divine nature of its construction." A religious meeting of some kind. Some crazed sect, no doubt, or perhaps members of different faiths getting together. He hadn't seen anything resembling a chapel in the floating compound, though Altman, not a religious man himself, hadn't realized this until now. He slowed, kept listening, trying to get a sense of who these people were. "We must lose ourselves to find ourselves," said the scientist. "Convergence is the only salvation. For I hear this in its whispers. Unless you can understand what it means to become one with the marker, you shall not have eternal life." The word, marker, coming at a moment when he expected to hear a deity referenced, made Altman shiver. He continued hurriedly on. Only once he'd left the corridor did he realize that what he had witnessed was the beginning of some kind of new religion, this one based on the marker. It scared the shit out of him. In the days that followed, he overheard such talk more and more frequently, even from Ada. Their opposing philosophies of the marker had come between them to an even greater degree than his unwillingness to stop doing things that might be dangerous. In a matter of a few short days, their notions of the world had become radically different. He realized at a certain point that they'd begun to avoid each other when they could. He still loved her, but he felt like he was losing her and didn't know how to get her back. Despite that, he was still surprised the first time he saw her on the fringes of one of the religious groups. "Can we talk about this?" he asked her, drawing her away from the crowd. "I've been trying to talk to you about it," she said, "but you just won't see the light." "That's not talking," he said. "That's preaching." They fought, and Ada threatened to leave him. Even though he knew it was hopeless, that their relationship was in the process of dying, he agreed to at least hear her out. It was in listening to Ada that he began to get a clear sense of the believer's philosophy. They believed the marker to be divine, that it had been sent to them by God for humanity's benefit. "We must believe in it and bend ourselves to its will, and then it will heal us. It will unify us and make us free and perfect." A strange mishmash of Christianity and paganism, it gave people something to hold on to in the face of the uncertainty and anxiety about the marker. Soon, Altman realized a new problem would emerge, as everyone on board, just like he and Ada, would be split between believers and unbelievers. At first, Markov's guards ignored this, but as the groups became larger and more dynamic, they started to break them up, presumably on Markov's orders. But this only seemed to make people want to meet more frequently. It seemed an indication to many that there was something the military didn't want them to know. Meanwhile, plans to raise the marker continued. There was still a great deal of excitement, but it had metamorphosed into fervor on the one side and apprehension on the other. Altman went down in the bathyscaphe twice more, both times alone. Both times to supervise the robots attaching cables to the net that now contained the marker. Twice more, hovering near the ocean floor, he hallucinated Ada's mother. She repeated what she had said before, but it was no clearer this time. "Where exactly shall we leave the marker?" he asked her. "The marker, as long as it lives within this sphere of gravitation, is where it must be." What the hell does that mean? He wondered. "What is going to happen to us?" he asked. "You must not study it. If you do, you will succumb to convergence," she declared. "Perhaps it is already too late." "If we converge, what will happen?" "You shall finally begin from the new beginning." "What does that mean?" "You shall be made one, and you shall lose yourself." He came back up to the surface feeling even more confused than before. He thought maybe the believers were right, that the marker was something divine. He thought, what if it's a homing beacon for an alien race, something to call them down to us, the forerunner of our own destruction? No, he was not the sort of person who was easily given to believe. He didn't know if he believed in God, and he certainly didn't believe in organized religion. Late one night, while he was getting ready for bed, Ada nowhere to be seen, probably hiding from him, a knock came at the door. He went to the door. "Who is it?" he asked. "Field," said a voice through the door. "Let me in." Field? Why would Field want to see him? They hadn't gotten along well since they'd first come to the floating facility. When he opened the door, it was to find Field flanked by a dozen others. "What is it?" asked Altman upon seeing them. "We need to talk to you," said Field. "Please let us come in." Not knowing what else to do, Altman did. They filed solemnly in one by one, standing in place or sitting on the bed, filling the room. "We've come to ask you to lead us," said Field. "Lead you? Lead you in doing what?" "You've seen it," said someone from the crowd. Altman didn't see who. "Seen what?" "The marker," said Field. "You've spent more time around it than anyone else. We know what happened on the bathyscaphe. When it killed others, it left you alive. We know that it converses with you. You have been chosen." "How do you know what happened on the bathyscaphe?" Altman asked. "We have brethren not only among the general population," said Field. "We have many close to Markov. You understand more than anyone else. You must guide us. You are our prophet. It is the Marker's will. Let me get this straight, said Altman. You want me to lead you as the prophet of your religion. A rumble of assent shivered through them. For Altman, time seemed to have slowed to an excruciatingly slow pace. He moved back until he was touching a wall. Did Ada put you up to this? He asked. Please, said Field. Tell us what to do. No way, said Altman. A collective groan arose from the crowd. Are we not worthy? Asked Field. What must we do to be worthy? I liked you better when all you did was sit at your desk for 8 hours a day, said Altman, and I didn't like you much then. You shall lead us, said Field. You cannot abandon us. I don't believe in the shit you do, said Altman. They stared at him, astonished. When he looked back at Field, he saw a crafty expression had fallen over his face. This is a test, said Field. Wait, hold on. He said, He is testing us! I am not testing you, he said evenly. Field smiled. We understand, he said. Now is not the time. We shall watch and wait. When the moment comes, we will be ready to come to your side. I'll say it again, said Altman. I am not a believer. But you will be, said Field. I know. You may be a reluctant prophet, but you are a prophet nonetheless. I have seen it in a vision. Now is not the time, said Altman. Get the hell out. They filed out slowly, each stopping to lay a hand on his arm or shake his hand, touching him as if he were some sort of good luck charm. His skin was crawling. Okay. This we get to. Alright. So some big things happening in this chapter. Alright. So more and more people are starting to see hallucinations. Now it seems to be spreading to even the people who weren't even being affected by it before, including Altman. And now we seem to be getting a particular sort of division between the people who are seeing these hallucinations. And this difference, this schism, seems to start, or seems to be most prominent, between two of our principal characters. Altman and Ada. Now, Altman knows it's a hallucination. And this seems to be tied to the fact that he is starting to see multiple individuals. But they all seem to be saying to leave the Marker alone. Ada hold on. Now, Ada, she is only seeing one person, her mother. And she thinks that this is actual, legitimate communication with spirits of the dead. And as a result, we're starting to see the beginnings of unitology. Because, the population of the floating facility seems to be split into three factions, let's say. You've got the people like Altman who are seeing... Give me 1 second, actually. Ugh. You got the people like Altman who don't seem to really be fazed too much by these hallucinations, knowing, of course, that they are hallucinations. You've got the people being whipped up into a religious fervor, people like Ada. And then you've got people like, what was the dude's name? That guy what sliced him own throat open, Meyer. You got people like Meyer who are having a complete breakdown, and just they're the ones that are ending up doing like the murders and the suicides and stuff like that. Now, of course, as the series is going to go on, this is going to further branch and splinter and stuff like that, and you're going to get like the unitologists that are also going to start murdering and killing themselves. The difference is that the people that are being whipped up into violent frenzies are trying to violently stop what is coming. Like a lot of them are just like, they need our bodies. They can't have my body. I won't let them have my body. And then they just start a murdering. Unitologists want to willingly submit themselves to this. And most importantly, and this is one of the things that I actually really like about Dead Space as a series, and unitology as this sort of antagonistic force within it, is that unitology isn't like, I think I've talked about this before with regards to the main villain of Dead Space 3, or the main human villain, Danik. Unitology isn't a grift. Any unitologist antagonist within the Dead Space series is 100% committed to this religion, and that's why they're dangerous. So this isn't a question of like I guess what I'm getting at is that like unitology is like this actual real belief system that developed out of these scientists that worked with the marker. Like, it's not some grift. It's not some, like, big government, like, conspiracy cover-up thing. No. In the end, these people who are hearing these like hallucinations that they think are the spirits of the dead talking to them about convergence, they're starting to think, hey, this might actually be the coolest shit, because if this marker is showing us our dead loved ones, if it is giving us a chance to see our dead loved ones again, and they're talking about convergence as this great joining of consciousness that we are all, like, destined for, maybe that's some pretty cool shit. And then they start viewing Altman as a prophet. Altman be praised is the phrase that is repeated and repeated and repeated by unitologists all the time since Dead Space 1. This has been the rallying cry of unitology. Altman be praised. Altman doesn't want shit fuck to do with any of this. He hates that they're viewing him as his prophet. And they're only viewing him as a prophet because he has spent the most time in and around the crater as anyone and lived to tell about it. All these other people that have like gone nuts, killed themselves, been killed by others, they're starting to view this as the marker saw them, decided they were unworthy, and took their lives. The marker showed itself to you, connected with you, and you're still alive. Clearly, there's something there. There's something there. We want you to lead us. Ah, shit. Opened up my start menu. 1 second. And again, Altman wants absolutely nothing to do with it. This weird religious fervor is already causing a huge strain on his relationship with Ada. The last thing that he wants is to get any deeper into it than he unfortunately already is. All of this is also, of course, combined with the fact that he is still having hallucinations. They are still just rotating through different people. And they're still being really, really, really vague as to what exactly Altman needs to do, or if possibly it's already too late. So, let's find out how poorly this can go. Whoop. Chapter 46. He watched from the bathyscaphe as the robotic units finished, threading the marker and cables. There it lay before him, bound in truss, but somehow still imposing despite its metal net. This is the cause of my problems, he thought, and now my problems are only going to get worse. He watched from 5 meters above it as the larger cable, the one running curved up into the darkness and to the ship above, grew taut. The MROMs had dug around the base, but there was no telling if it would come up. In a way, he hoped it wouldn't. He held his breath. The markers sagged lower in the net, and for a moment he thought the net would not hold. It creaked and swayed slowly in the darkness, and they came up with a large, grating sound, oddly distorted by the water, and began to rise. He followed it up, relaying messages and corrections to a series of submarines, which in turn relayed them upward and to the surface. At first the marker twisted as it rose, the water naturally channeling around the 2 spirals of the marker, and that's a little redundant, and making it turn, creating an invisible whirlpool in its wake. It could, Altman realized, soon become a problem, tangling the cables, so he slowed the towing down to a snail's pace, and it stopped. After a while, it was moving regularly, ascending slowly but straight upward. Hello, Sirius, the starry wolfer. It's a hell of a first message, but thank you for joining the Sharkstream all the same. I hope you're doing well. Where was I? Hold on. I gotta find my place again. Ah! Thank you for the follow. It scared the shit out of me, but thank you. This is it, thought Altman. Slowly it rose through the darkness. Only once they were halfway to the surface did he realize he hadn't experienced any hallucinations. His head, for the first time in months, didn't ache. He checked the readings, found that the signal had stopped broadcasting around the time it began to rise. Sylvia is my name. Well, welcome, Sylvia. It's good to have you here. I hope you enjoy your time here at the Sharkstream Book Club. Maybe we've disconnected it, he thought. Perhaps we're doing something right. Perhaps this was what we were supposed to do. Maybe it was transmitting so that we would find it and bring it to the surface. Maybe that was its purpose. For a moment he felt reassured, and then unanswered questions began to assail him. If that were really the case, then why would there have been any hallucinations at all? And why would they affect people most strongly when they were close to the marker itself? It's almost as if it wants to keep us at a distance. What do the dead's warnings of convergence have to do with any of it? Maybe we've done something right, he thought, or maybe we've done something very wrong. Soon they would get close to the surface, and the marker would be drawn onto the freighter itself. Already the water had changed, the darkness receding, and he could see the marker more clearly than he'd ever seen it before. In the light, it was even more impressive, covered with symbols, and the soundtrack scared me. There was like a buzz in the soundtrack just before the instrument started up, and I thought, like, is there a bee? Is there a bee in my room? Better not be. I've had a couple wasps in my room recently. It's been obnoxious. Where was I? Already the water had changed, and the light was even more impressive, covered with symbols and laterally striated by dark lines cut into the rock. He could still see. He still could see no evidence of joints or cracks. It still seemed like it was formed out of a single large rock. When the station was 500 meters above them, Markov ordered the ascent stopped. What's wrong? Asked Altman over the audio channel. This wasn't how it was planned. Thank you for your help to this point, Mr. Altman, said Markov. A deep-water craft is no longer required. Return to the submarine bay. What? I think I'll stay here, Markov, if you don't mind, said Altman. There was silence for a long moment, and then the vid screen crackled into life. He saw Markov's face. You've been an asset to me to this point. Now you risk becoming expendable. What's going on? Altman asked. That is none of your concern, said Markov. He opened his mouth and then closed it again. Markov, he knew, was capable of having the bathyscaphe torpedoed. Perhaps it was time to flee, dive deep and head for somewhere safe. As if he could read Altman's mind, Markov added, Do you need something tangible to convince you to behave? Your girlfriend? For a moment he hesitated. In a way, he had already lost Ada to the marker, to her desire to be one of them. It was just a matter of time before he lost her completely. All the same, he still loved her and couldn't live with her being dead because of him. With a sigh, he cut the signal and began to head for the surface, leaving the marker hanging in its gigantic metal net. On the way up, he passed a trio of submarines dragging a new cable. It led back, he could see, to the gigantic below-water chamber of the floating compound, the chamber that had been off-limits to everybody except for Markov's inner circle ever since they'd arrived. What Markov had planned, Altman had no idea. A bit of a shorter chapter, but there's going to be a few of those in this particular half of Part 5. Okay, so. One thing I wanted to mention real quick is that something that is a little funny and maybe kind of takes me out of the book is how much foresight Altman seems to have in the last chapter, where he's just like, oh man, it's like I'm seeing the beginning of some kind of new religion. And it's just like, fuck man, you sure are. Like that seems very funny to me. And maybe a little immersion destroying, where it's just like, there's no way he actually knows this. I don't feel like there's a way that like somebody would look at that and think, oh wow, it's almost like a new religion is being formed. It's probably more like, wow, this seems like a fucking cult. Which, I mean, would be just as apt, considering. But anyway, let's get to what's happened in this chapter. So, they're bringing up the marker. Oh, hold on. Oh, no. I fucked up. Hold on. I fucked up my goddamn settings. Here we go. It almost seemed like it wasn't going to happen, but then it started moving. It's in a big metal net now. So the marker is on the way up to the floating facility, which might be a good thing. But it could also be a bad thing. Now, we, as the audience, being familiar with the history of the Dead Space universe and the series where it's at right now, know that ultimately, yes, this is a bad thing that's happening right now. No good will come of this. But that, children, is what's called dramatic irony. When the audience is aware of something that the characters aren't. And stuff like this happens. So, Bobby Bop Bibo. I don't know what I'm saying. Okay. Now, everything seems to be going smoothly. There's a little bit of turbulence when they're bringing the marker up a little too quickly, and the water resistance causes it to start. Oh, fuck. Okay, hold on. Causes it to start sort of twisting in the net, because it's just sort of like spiraling. Because, I mean, if you're familiar with Dead Space, you know what a marker looks like. Of course it would start spiraling. But they slow it down to a stop. It evens out, and then they start back up again. But eventually, Markov calls off the excavation. And he reaches out to Altman. He's just like, "Hey, Altman, why don't you come on back? Why don't you come on back? I'll have someone else handle it from here." Did I spell Gucci right? I think I did. Is that how you spell Gucci? Hold on. I gotta fucking... Ugh. There's no H. It's off-brand Gucci. You know, it's like Versace from fucking Kamikaze Girls. God. Okay. Can I talk about this for a moment? Has anybody else seen the film Kamikaze Girls? It is a Japanese film about this unlikely friendship between a girl who is into gothic Lolita fashion and a member of a biker gang. And it is incredible. Like, I love it. It's a fantastic movie. And if you ever get the chance to see it, I highly recommend checking it out. I genuinely loved it. I saw it years ago. And it's super fucking good. But, like, I don't know what the DVD goes for these days. Hold on. We're going to bring the stream to we're going to bring the book club... Hi, Gray, by the way. Thank you for Gucky. We're going to bring the book club to a screeching halt so I can look up the price for a DVD of Kamikaze Girls. Let's take a look. Oh, it's only $35, actually. That's not bad. Hey, there's a Blu-ray now? Oh, the Blu-ray is over 100, though. Also, it looks like it's only Region 2. There's no Region 1 Blu-ray from the looks of it. And then let's compare it to a Steelbook 4K copy of Morbius. Well, I happen to have a Steelbook 4K copy of Morbius right here to compare it to. No. I do have that, though, for the record. The Steelbook 4K copy of Morbius. But no, Kamikaze Girls is a good fucking movie. Highly recommend checking it out. You just might need to watch it in less than legal circumstances, which is not something I would ever recommend. Let me be clear. I would never recommend that you seek out a pirated copy of Kamikaze Girls, the Japanese film about the unlikely companionship between a girl who is into gothic Lolita fashion and a member of a girl motorcycle gang. I would never suggest that you do that. Ever. Listen, piracy is a crime. You wouldn't download a car. What was I talking about before? It's book club. I'm supposed to be talking about a book. So Altman's just like, nah, I think I'm good. I'll chill out here with the marker and help you guys bring it up. So then Markov's just like, no, I think you should really come back. And Altman's just like, so then Markov's like, hey, wouldn't it be bad if something happened to your girlfriend? And Altman, despite the fact that, like, things aren't great between him and Ada already, is just like, and then he goes back. And on his way back, he notices a trio of submarines dragging the marker to the restricted area of the floating facility. And that's where our chapter ends. So how about we go ahead and check out what happened next? Shall we? Altman, come on, it's me, your boy. It's me, your boy, Markov. As soon as he left the bathscaff, he made for the chamber that he knew would house the marker. Centrally located and the biggest of the below-water chambers, it had 4 ways in, but 3 of those ways he discovered had been welded closed, permanently sealed. The 4th, the main entrance, already had 2 guards stationed in front of it. He tried to bluff his way in. I'm supposed to be here, he said, to bring the marker up. Do you have a pass? Asked one guard. Nobody gets in without a pass, said the other. I left my pass back in my room, he said. I don't want to be late. I'll bring it back and show it to you later. No pass, no entrance, said the guard. Another man, a scientist, sidled past him, flashing his pass, and was nodded through. Altman watched as the door slid open, but saw only an airlock on the other side. The man stood there waiting, and the door slid shut. Please, said Altman, I need to... We already told you, said the first guard. No pass, no entrance. Now move along or I'll have you thrown in the brig. He went back down the corridor. He couldn't get in, but maybe he could at least get some idea of what was happening. He went from lab to lab, trying doors until he found one that had a window facing toward the chamber. Looking out, he saw the marker hovering just below the chamber being slowly drawn up and in, but he couldn't see into the chamber itself. Something had been done to render the glass semi-opaque. He could see vague shapes, and the sense of movement, and then, as they began to reel it in, the shadowy rising shape of the marker. But little more. "You see," said Field, "we knew you would come around to the truth." Altman hadn't come around. He still thought that Field and his believers were insane, but saw no point in telling Field that. The marker had been in the station less than 24 hours, but ever since the marker had been raised and secured, the whole feel of the station had changed. Even before he'd entered the submarine bay, a series of researchers had been declared inessential and had been shipped back to the Dredger Corp land compound, which rumor had it was serving now as less of a research facility and more of a holding tank for scientists for whom Markov had no use, but whom he didn't want to release into the larger world. Ada had been among them, which meant he hadn't gotten a chance to see her and make sure she was okay. Altman suspected he, too, might have been among them if the bathyscaphe had arrived slightly earlier. As it was, he'd been told to pack his things, that he'd been among a batch of researchers to be shipped out early the next morning. Welcome back to How Will Altman Fuck Things Up Even More? We're bound to find out! I need a favor, he claimed, his hand on the chunk of marker that he carried in his pocket. There's something the marker wants from me. I have to see it. Field's face fell. It's being guarded, he said. It's very hard to see it. You said the other evening that some of the believers were in Markov's inner circle. Yes, said Field. That's true, but... It's important, said Altman. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't. He took the chunk out of his pocket and showed it to Field. This is a piece of it, he said. It needs to be returned. Field reached out and very gently touched it. Can I hold it? He asked, his voice filled with awe. Altman handed it to him. He took it delicately in both hands like he was holding a newborn child. His face lit up with a joy it frightened Altman to see. He crooned it to it, a soft chant, something that Altman couldn't make out, and then reluctantly handed it back. He knelt before Altman. Stand up, said Altman, and not a word to not a word, fucking shit goddamn, and not a word to anybody about what I plan to do. But Field refused to stand. Thank you for choosing me, he said, his head bowed. I will do all I can to help you make the marker whole again. Around 3 in the morning, a knock came at his door. It was Field and another man with him wearing the black garb of one of Markov's inner circle. He was carrying a package under his arm. Altman vaguely recognized him. This is Henry Harmon, Field said. Mr. Harmon, Michael Altman. I know who he is, said Harmon dryly. You're sure this is absolutely necessary? Altman nodded. Harmon tossed him the package. He tore it open, saw an outfit identical to Harmon's own. Put that on, he said. Altman stared at it. How's this going to help? He asked. Won't they recognize me in any case? Maybe, said Harmon, but they won't try to stop us. They won't question the past as long as you have the uniform. If we have trouble, it will be afterward, which is a risk I'll have to take. He put it on, and they set off. Field followed them, but Harmon turned briefly, shook his head, and Field, a look of disappointment on his face, disappeared. He checked his chronometer. There are 4 guards total, 2 at the door outside the chamber and 2 inside, all armed. We're lucky. The 2 guards inside are with us, though that's far from being generally known. The 2 outside, though, aren't. Shift changes in about 15 minutes and all bets are off. If we stay longer than 10, chances are good that one of the guards will get curious and place a call to check on our authorization. Understood? Yes, said Altman. Here's your pass, he said. It's not the best, but the guards outside should only glance at it. The men inside will go with whatever I say. I need to take a moment, because I'm feeling a little lightheaded, which is usually indicative of the fact that I need to eat something, because having energy drink on empty stomach is bad idea. So, I mentioned the other day that I have managed to finally... I say finally, but I don't want to make it seem like it's just like, oh, finally. Because, you know, I'm generally a patient person. But I have managed to get art for the rest of the Dead Space series. So, once we have gotten a chance to move on to other games in the Dead Space series, we will be able to continue. Which I am very excited about. Because even though I have played Dead Space 3 at least once already, that was a classic mode run. And that was back in the days of me streaming directly from my Xbox One. Which, while incredibly convenient, did, at the time, result in an audio delay. That, unfortunately, like, I look back on that now, I'm just like, gross. But mostly, I'm excited to continue the story of Dead Space ahead of the release of the remake in January. Or is it January of next year? When's Dead Space Remake coming out? We got a date. I just don't remember when it is. Dead Space Remake release date. Oh yeah, January 2023. So, that'll be fun. Especially since I'm going to have to decide, do I want to run through these games with, like, you know, legitimate weaponry? Or do I just want to fuck around with the foam finger since I unlocked it for both games? Because, like, I could do that if I wanted to. It was actually a lot of fun playing through hardcore mode in Dead Space 2. A lot of very tense moments. Only because fuck DS3 and its difficulty. See, the thing about DS3, though, I know the issue with DS3's difficulty where it is actually balanced for co-op, so it's a lot more difficult if you're playing it single player. But I'm also, like, I've also got, like, super busted weapons just kind of by default. Like, not even talking about the foam finger, like, hold on. My go-to weapon in Dead Space 3 that isn't the foam finger is a weapon called the Mjolnir, which is primary fire is an arc lightning gun, and then the secondary fire is a pneumatic hammer attachment. And the thing about the arc lightning is that if you hit an enemy with it and there are other enemies in the vicinity, the lightning will jump between enemies. Now, with the way that I have it upgraded, one shot is enough to kill a whatever, like a slasher. Like, let's say, for example, I'm facing down like 3 slashers, right? If I shoot one of them with the arc lightning, that one is dead. And then the other two get hit with, like, residual, like, damage from, like, the lightning jumping between each of them. And then if I shoot either of the other two, it kills both of them. That's not even to talk about the Swarmer replacement for Dead Space 3, like the guys that aren't technically necromorphs, but have been granted, like, long life because they've been feeding on necromorph flesh for fucking ever. If you've got the arc lightning from the Mjolnir, and you've got a room full of those guys, you hit one of them, it kills, like, all of them. Up to, I want to say, like, 6 enemies. Like, if there's more than 6 in the room, which isn't something that happens often because, you know, the game engine can only take so much. But, like, you're clearing out basically all but one of them. It's fucking nuts. And in some cases, it does enough damage that not only does it kill them, but it also does just enough damage to knock out whatever item they're holding without you having to walk over and stomp on them. It's nuts. And then, of course, I've also got the plasma cutter for Dead Space 3, upgraded to the point that it is, of course, completely fucking busted. Because I do love having completely fucking busted plasma cutters in Dead Space games. They are, by far, like, just, regardless of which game you're playing, Dead Space 1, 2, or 3, by far, one of the best weapons to have. So, like, I could play through that whole game without the foam finger and be totally fine. But what I'm really excited for is that once we finish playing through Dead Space 3, I'm going to do a second playthrough with friend of the stream and roommate JB joining me, where they're going to be playing as Isaac Clarke, and I'll be doing a full run of the game on co-op as John Carver, which I am super excited for because I haven't done that yet. So how about that Callisto game? How's that looking? I'm excited for the Callisto Protocol. It is just Dead Space, but, like, that's not a bad thing, and I will definitely be playing that. I want to say that comes out, like, the day after my birthday, so I'm just like, oh yeah, definitely a day one stream for that. It does look very goopy. I like that. I'm also still kind of, like, isn't that supposed to take place in, like, the PUBG universe? Like, I didn't realize that had, like, an overarching story. But then I don't really play Battle Royale games, so, you know. Not anymore? Okay. I wasn't sure. It used to. Okay, okay. Alright, let's get back to the book. Oh, hold on, I gotta make a gross noise first. Okay, I'm good. Harmon was right. The guards outside the room seemed hardly surprised that someone was coming in to see the marker in the middle of the night. They looked at Harmon and then glanced at both passes and waved them in. The guards inside didn't even bother with that, withdrawing discreetly to the other side of the room as soon as they entered. There it was. A series of catwalks had been built up along the walls to make it easy to get a close look at any part of it. Massive and towering, it dominated the whole chamber. Seeing it out of the water, he got a fuller sense of its bulk and strangeness. It was like nothing he had ever seen. A kind of impossible object that was nevertheless there. A power seemed to emanate from it. It was dangerous. At the same time, he felt his scientific impulses kicking in. It was amazing, and he genuinely wanted to study it. A piece of extremely advanced technology, something predating humanity. He took out his holopod and began to vid it. "What are you doing?" whispered Harmon. "Nobody is allowed to vid it." "That's what I came for," he said. "But it's not allowed." Altman shrugged once, then ignored him. Either Harmon would stop him or he wouldn't. He filmed the whole structure at first, then ran the lens in close-up over the sides closest to him. As he did so, he tried to spot the place where the piece of rock he had in his pocket was from, but couldn't find it. He felt like he'd only just begun when Harmon grabbed his arm. "We've got to go," he whispered. Altman nodded. He slipped the holopod back into his pocket and headed for the door, Harmon pulling him along. Harmon nodded once to the guards on the inside, and they resumed their stations. The guards on the outside, he saluted. "Why do you need a vid of it?" asked Harmon as they walked away. I have half a mind to turn you in. It's important, said Altman. Trust me. You'll see. 5 minutes later, he was back in his room, hastily packing. The hunk of rock he kept on his person. He backed up his holopod onto a memory stick, which he hid in the lining of his jacket, just in case. And then he lay down on the bed and waited. But sleep wouldn't come. Every time he closed his eyes, he woke up feeling so... He could see the marker there, towering above him. It was powerful. It was dangerous. It wanted something from them. Why did Ada worship it? To worship it would be just to put your fucking shit, goddamn. To worship it would be just to put yourself even more fully at its mercy. And it was not the sort of thing Altman felt to grant mercy. Soon, in an hour or two, a knock would come at the door and he'd be escorted to launch and sent back to the land compound. He stared up into the darkness, thinking. Once there, he could forget all about this, pretend like the marker was no longer his problem, and let Markov do with it what he would while he went back to his life. Or he could figure out a way to smuggle out the vid he'd taken of the marker, make it available to the general public, and try to make the marker a matter of international scientific inquiry rather than a toy for the military. The first possibility would mean safety, a chance to lead a more or less normal life. Probably he could patch up his relationship with Ada. Maybe with time, miles away from the marker, separated from the hallucinations of her mother, she would begin to come to her senses. She would stop thinking about it, would regain her sanity. Everything could turn out okay. That is, assuming nothing went wrong with the marker. The second might mean danger, even death. Markov and his goons wouldn't hesitate to kill both him and Ada if they became, as Markov liked to say, expendable. He already knew which one he would take. He'd never been the sort to take the safe route. Now all he had to do was figure out how to get the news out. Okay. Sometimes the transition hurts. That Luma wipe? It's painful. Did you know? Anyways. Happy Pride, everyone. So, Altman is not allowed to see the marker. Oh, because I said the transition is painful sometimes. Okay. Yeah. All right. No, that's a good joke. It's a good joke. You got me there. That's way funnier than my bit. So Altman's of course not allowed to see the marker. Not very many people are. Really just people who have the passes that allow them to get into the restricted area. So Altman hatches a plan. Altman decides that he's going to go to Field and be like, yo, Field, guess what? I am definitely 100% now a believer. Not a trace of doubt in my mind. I'm in love. Ooh, I'm a believer. Do you get the joke yet? I am singing I Am a Believer by the Monkees. Also made popular by Eddie Murphy in the film Shrek. Thank you for coming to the Sharkstream. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah. So he's just like, surely this won't backfire in any notable way. So, Field shows up. The marker is turning you into puns. The marker doesn't need to do that to me. I do that all on my own. Um, so Field drops by, and Altman's just like, yo, Field, check this out. And he shows him a really cool rock. And Field's just like, yo, that's a cool rock. This rock sends me into a religious fervor. And Altman manages to convince Field to help him get into the chamber where the marker is being held. So Field brings in his buddy Harmon. Nah, I shouldn't say that. They call characters marker heads in the actual games, but given that I'm pretty sure the reason that they do that is because there are like direct parallels to like derogatory terms for like people of like modern day religions, like real world religions, I shouldn't use that. It feels a little weird to actually type out. There we go. That's perfect. So, Harmon is, of course, not just a member of Markov's inner circle, but he's also one of the true believers, one of the members of like the group of true believers, the people that the marker's signal is whipping into a religious frenzy because they're like, ooh, baby, we can see our dead loved ones again. Now, Harmon agrees to help, what's-his-face, Altman, get into the marker chamber. And he does so by putting on special... special super cool membership clothes. Which allow him to get past the first set of guards who see him wearing the outfit and just kind of like barely acknowledge the pass that he shows them. And of course, as is established, the guards that are actually inside the marker chamber are also believers. It feels weird. I'm dancing around calling them unitologists because unitology technically doesn't exist yet. But like just unitologists. The guys inside are unitologists. They're unitologists before unitology exists. So they manage to get inside. And Altman's just like, I'm going to film the marker. Harmon doesn't like this. But Altman's just like... And then Harmon doesn't really have any further objections. So he gets his film, he gets the marker's hot picks, and then they shuffle on out before the change of guards can happen. Altman heads on back. Now, one thing that Altman mentions is that he can't see where the chunk of rock came off of, which either means that he wasn't getting the marker's good side, or that the marker seems to have self-repaired. It's not clear which it's supposed to be. But Altman goes on back to his room, packs up, resigned to being shipped off to the Dredger Corp land facility where he's pretty sure what's going to happen is he's just going to be held there until fucking whenever. And he is presented with two choices. He can either live the rest of his life, forget about the marker, and just not worry about it, or he can do something fucking stupid. And I think we both know what Altman's gonna do at this point. I'm gonna have to go off the chalkboard here real quick. Don't worry about it, it's fine. The wooden part is also part of the chalkboard. Altman and stupidity go together like PB and J. And that's where our chapter ends. I think the rest of the chapters for this part are pretty short. Like, let's see. Well, no, that one's not particularly short. That one is, though. As is that one. But we've got, like, 4 chapters left. One fairly long one, and then a couple short ones. So let's go ahead and keep on barreling forward. Okay. Chapter 48. Markov went from holophile to holophile, looking for some good news. So far, nothing. So far, the marker had remained unresponsive and mute. They had tried everything they could think of. They had begun to experiment on it. A team of cryptologists was attempting to decipher the symbols on the marker, but without any idea of what the symbols referred to, they weren't making any progress. They had subjected it to an electric current, without result. They had tried irradiating it, subjecting it to radio waves, microwaves, electromagnetic waves. Nothing. Always nothing. Or almost nothing. The marker, the researchers had told him, had begun to broadcast again. Very slight now, but definitely present. Some of the scientists working on the markers seemed to notice it, others did not. According to Stevens, those who noticed had begun to be visited by dead relatives, just as Altman had been in the bathyscaphe, all with some variation of the same message. Leave the marker alone, do not try to make use of it. The scientists themselves didn't understand it any better than he did, and after conveying the message to Stevens, they had started speculating about it amongst themselves. It was a warning, some felt, and should be taken at face value. Nobody should touch the marker, nobody should try to harness its technology. If they did, they would unleash something they couldn't imagine. But maybe it was simply that they weren't ready, others felt, that once they proved themselves worthy, the secrets of the marker would be revealed to them. There were many more in the latter camp. A mystical belief in the marker had started to grow. Whenever they could, the believers gathered together and worked themselves up, convinced as they were that the marker was the path to eternal life and oneness with the divine. Some argued that this was what it meant by convergence. So far, the movement had been held in check by the guards, but even some of them, Markov realized, had started to become believers. He was in danger of losing control of his project. They needed to find a simple way to harness the power of the marker and do it quickly. He was sure the technology once harnessed would be the pathway to tremendous power, even domination of the world, not to mention the moon. Even the solar system. The solar system. That's not how you emphasize that. Even the solar system. But now a group of believing scientists was trying to put down strict rules about how the marker could be examined. Only respectful interaction with the marker should be tolerated, nothing that might threaten or damage it or cause it to think less of humanity. We need to show the marker that we were worthy of it so that it would begin to teach us. It was ridiculous. It was a ridiculous list of demands, and Markov dismissed them out of hand, but he couldn't stop people from talking. There was a palpable shift in how people approached the marker, even if Markov had refused the believers' demands. Indeed, he was surprised at how many people in the facility seemed to feel an almost religious awe for the marker. Something was changing, shifting, in a way that didn't respond to his usual tactics. He had to figure out a new way to approach the situation. He put a vidlink through to Cracks. From how quickly he answered, it was clear he'd been waiting beside the monitor for the call. "You've had a chance to look over the data?" Cracks asked. "Yes," said Markov. "What is your recommendation, Officer Cracks?" "An unequivocal refusal to what is with me today? An unequivocal refusal to meet any of their demands. Once we begin to do so, we'll never stop. They're crazies. They shouldn't be tolerated." "It won't end there," said Markov. Maybe not, said Krax, but we have the firepower and they don't. All right, said Markov. See to it. 2 days later, Krax had a call from one of the guards at the marker chamber. It's the scientists, sir, he said. Krax could hear a steady rumble of noise in the background. They're protesting. They won't leave the chamber. Make them leave, said Krax. It's not as easy as that, said the guard. There are a lot of them. We've had to call for reinforcements. What should we do? Don't do anything until I get there, said Krax, and disconnected. By the time Krax and his team reached the chamber, things had become more serious. The scientists, led by a pudgy man named Field, had encircled the marker. They had locked arms and were attempting to keep the guards at a distance. The guards had their weapons out. Many of them were visibly upset. What is it? Krax asked one of them. What happened? You'll have to ask that one, he said, and gestured at Field. All right, said Krax. He removed his plasma pistol from its holster and walked forward to the line to where the man was. What is the meaning of this? He asked. We sent you our demands, said Field. We read them and rejected them, said Krax. We're here to protect the marker until you agree to them. Starting an insurrection, are you? This will surely end poorly for you. A few of the men in the line rustled and looked at one another, though fewer than Krax hoped. Field looked a little nervous, but his voice was still steady when he spoke. We're trying to do what's right, he said. What's right, said Krax, is for you and your friends to go back to your quarters. You'll respect our demands then, said Field. Krax levelly met his eye. You shouldn't be interfering in something you don't understand, he said. I'll ask you again to break your line and go. Field gulped and then shook his head. Honestly, thought Krax, to look at the guy you wouldn't think he had it in him, but belief makes people unpredictable. I'll ask once more, said Krax. After that, I'm done asking. Field had started to sweat. His eyes seemed strangely glazed, but still determined. He tightened his lips into a white line and shook his head. Krax smiled. Raising the pistol slightly, he shot Field in the foot. He went down in a heap, screaming, and the room broke into chaos. A plasma beam fired by one of the believers cut close across his cheek, singeing his hair, and struck a guard just behind him, full in the face. He went down, bleeding, blinded. Krax crouched, shot another scientist in the leg. Shots flew back and forth on both sides. And then Krax had an idea. He fired directly at the marker, watched the blue fire splat on the surface and flicker about before going out. He darted forward to Field and knelt beside him where he lay grimacing in pain. He forced Field's head around to look at the marker and then fired at it again. No, said Field, clearly terrified. You'll hurt it! Don't! Tell them to stop, shouted Krax. Tell them to put down their weapons and surrender or I'll have every guard in here shooting the thing. To show he meant business, he fired at the marker a third time. Suddenly, he was overwhelmed with pain, his head feeling as though it were ready to explode. He gasped for breath. People all around him were doing the same. Field screamed and then began to yell for the believers to listen to him, to stop the violence, to put their weapons down. At first, the believers were too distracted by pain, but gradually they gathered themselves and stood as if stunned. Krax bellowed and raised his open palm to stop his guards from resuming firing. God, his head hurt. For the good of the marker, we must concede the battle, said Field, wincing from the pain in his leg. Lay down your weapons, brothers. Do not resist. Krax was amazed when he found that, to a man, they did. Just more proof, he thought, that religion is a dead end. The next 20 minutes were spent imprisoning the believers and attending to the wounded. There were 4 dead, 2 guards and 2 scientists. He ordered them dragged off to the morgue. Krax smiled. He hadn't had so much fun since the mood skirmishes. It had been a very satisfying day. If only his head didn't hurt so much, he would have been downright perfect. Alright. So, not the shortest chapter we've gotten, but not really a lot happened, to be fair. So, what did happen? Well, things aren't going super well, honestly. So let's go ahead, let me flip back here again. So, thus far, Markov and his team are not having the easiest time with the marker. All right, so they're having some trouble studying it. No one can seem to figure out what the symbols on it even mean, which means that they don't really have, like, a way to, like, decipher. Because they don't, like, there's no way to decipher the symbols because they don't fucking know what the symbols are supposed to be. God, if only they had those scribbled alphabets on the walls of Dead Space 1 to help them. Unitology teaming up with the LA gangs. And moreover, some of the believers have started issuing demands. Hold on. Better joke. So these babby unis, unitology in its infancy, they want these guys to respect the marker. Like, hey, we need to be nice to this giant chunk of psychic rock. And Markov's just like, fuck that! But unfortunately, as a result, they start protesting this, and they form a human chain around the marker. So Markov has, like, his main dude, Cracks, go in to deal with the problem. And our boring boy, Field, gets fucking foot shot. And just all hell breaks loose, and the believers start shooting, and the guards start shooting. And Cracks has this brilliant idea of, like, I know, I will threaten their object of worship. So he shoots the marker, and then he is just like, hey, Field, check this out. And he shoots the marker again, and Field's like, no! And Cracks is just like, if you don't stop this, I'll have everybody shoot it. And he shoots it a third time. And then the marker is just like... The marker hits them with that psychic attack. And everybody is just like, oof, ouch, my nog. And Field is just like, okay, fine, we'll stop being weird, crazy cultists. And Cracks is just like, haha, I got to shoot somebody today. This has been a good day. I am definitely a well-balanced individual. Ouch, my head hurts. And then that's where the chapter ends. Also, 4 people died. But don't worry about it. But let's go ahead and see how Altman's doing, shall we? Chapter 49. It started again, said Altman. The pulse, I'm sure of it. He was clutching his head when he said it, clearly in pain. Ada, too, was rubbing her forehead, though absently, not suffering as much. You're sure? I'm sure, he said. Then I'll see her again. My mother will come back. Altman turned away, frustrated. They were in the land compound, which had become, as they immediately found out, more like a detainment center than a research facility. Their labs were empty, containing only the most basic equipment. There was only one way out of the center, and that was guarded day and night by a rotation of 3 men who had originally corralled him for Markov before he had come for the floating compound. I can't help but point out here that there's a lot of situations where it's just like, hey, there's only one entrance to this place, and I'm just like, that's a fucking fire hazard. But again, the Dead Space universe has not really ever been known for its OSHA compliance. All had names that started with T. Terry was thin with glasses, but he carried a large caliber gun. The other two, Tim and Tom, were brothers, large men who looked enough alike to be twins. On the first day, Altman had tried to go outside and was stopped. "But I just wanted to," he started to say. "Nobody in or out," said this bespectacled Terry. "That's the rule until the boss says otherwise." When he tried later, with either Tim or Tom on duty, he met a less verbal refusal and was simply pushed back and then, when he persisted, punched in the stomach. "Go away," Tim or Tom said. There were maybe 20 of them in the compound, including nearly all the scientists from Chicxulub except for Field and, for some reason, Showalter. They tried to continue the research they had been doing on the floating compound, but without proper equipment, it was impossible. Instead, they compared notes, shared information, and research. Like Ada, many of them had become believers. Many of them had been part of Field's flock and looked up to Altman, recognizing him as a reluctant prophet. "The marker has chosen me," an ichthyologist named Agassiz confided in him. "I don't know why, but I know it to be the case." "Why are you telling me this?" "I know you speak to it," said Agassiz. "Ask it about me." Others were like that as well, approaching him, hoping for a sign or a blessing. At first he tried to tell them that it wasn't possible, that he wasn't a prophet, but it was difficult enough to convince them that he had found a few cryptic words or a muttered blessing was quicker and would get them to leave him alone. Speaking with Agassiz, he realized that it would be a simple matter to manipulate them. He could tell Agassiz that he had a role and that his role was to obey Altman. There were enough believers that he could use their belief to get them to help him break out. But he hesitated. If they were to try to leave now, they might manage to overpower whichever the 3 guards was on duty, but probably not before a few of them were hurt or killed. The last thing he wanted was more deaths on his conscience. Despite the lack of equipment, Scud somehow managed to create a limited set of research equipment, partially by stripping out the wires of the security system, including something to provide a crude measurement of the pulse. He was able to confirm that, yes, in fact, the pulse was up and functioning strongly. "I cannot say exactly how strongly," he said. "There is a limitation of equipment." "Yes," said Altman, but within that limitation, you can confirm that it seems strong." "There is a limitation of equipment," Scud insisted. But as it turned out, Altman didn't need Scud to tell him. He could tell by the way the people around him changed, becoming either withdrawn or violent. And by the fact that he kept turning the corner and running into ghosts. "Help us," they pleaded. "Make us whole." He brooded, wondered what he could do. He had to go public, but how? He couldn't escape. And then, suddenly, late one night, walking down the hall, he realized that the guard on duty at the front door, Tim or Tom, was talking to himself. He watched him gesture to empty air and then hold out his rifle and let go of it. It clattered to the ground, and he just left it there, and then went rapidly down the hall, passing Altman without a second glance. Nobody was guarding the door. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed his wallet, his holopod, and ate his hand and immediately rushed to escape. Sure enough, there was still no one there. The key left in the lock. With shaking fingers, he turned it and opened the door. What if it's a trap? He couldn't help but think. Maybe it is a trap, but it might also be my only chance. He crossed the threshold and ran, dragging Ada reluctantly behind him. He was already formulating his next steps. A car or bus out of town, then a flight back to the North American sector. He'd have to move quickly, but if he did, he might get word out. It was time to go public. Blue Skidoo, we can too. Oh, wait. Blue Skidoo, we can too. There we go. That was the wrong scene. Okay. So, the land compound is basically scientist prison. Scientiet? And it's guarded by our boys. Tim, Tom, and Terry. The 3 T's, as it were. T cubed. My phone's buzzing at me. Why is my phone buzzing at me? Wild Haiti, that is a very good tweet you've made. Thank you for that. I lost my train of thought because I saw that very good tweet. So Altman has decided to do a fun thing where he has decided to further manipulate the people that see him as a prophet. And is basically just like, hey, you know what would be super cool? If you, like, helped me do shit. And he's starting to, like, just... You're starting to see where he is making decisions that are ultimately going to lead to the unitology we know and love today. Love, quote unquote. Including the fact that he has stopped trying to discourage them and instead is basically just being like, oh yeah, the peace be with you. This is the cup of my blood. This bread is my body. Fucking fuck off. Amen. Whatever. And everybody's just like, fuck yeah, Altman be praised. And running off. And it's just like, my guy, this isn't going to work out the way that you want it to. In fact, you're making things actively worse for people who are going to have to deal with this 300 years from now. But Altman don't care. Altman's too busy coming up with the next dumb decision he's about to make. So one night, he heads on out, wondering, how the fuck am I going to get out of this compound? So either Tim or Tom is like talking to someone that Altman can't see, which means he's hallucinating. And he holds his gun out and he lets it go and it falls to the floor. And then he just fucking walks away. And he knows Altman's there. Like, Altman's not making any sort of like attempt to hide or anything based on the description. So he just fucking leaves and he left the key in the fucking door. So Altman just grabs everything he can, including Ada, and fucking bolts. Hold on. No, that's not how that's formatted. And he's out now. And he is ready to take everything about this public. Also, there's a scene with Scud. And Scud is just as helpful as ever. But they do confirm that the pulse has started up again, and it's functioning very strongly. We talk about this in the movie, I'm sure, with the logo of the marker on someone's necklace. I think there's a couple people in the movies who have, like, marker necklaces. I always wanted one of those. Like, they sold those back when, at, like, the height of Dead Space's popularity. I want to say around the time of Dead Space 2. They sold little plastic marker pendants, and I wanted one. And now you can't get them anymore. I don't know if they're going to bring back some of that merchandise when the remake comes out. I kind of hope they do. Because, like, I really kind of bummed that I missed out on that. I'm trying to think. Samuel Irons had a marker necklace in Downfall. There was the pilot who gets killed by Kuttner in Aftermath. Also has a Unitology necklace, I think. Which, like, I think I've talked about this before, like, the movies trying to do, like, no, hey, here's some Unitologists who are actually, like, likable characters. But, like, the second that you know they're Unitologists, all I can think about is these guys are an MK Ultra password away from snapping and killing everybody in the fucking vicinity, including themselves. Like, that's all I can fucking think about. Because that's all Unitologists. All Unitologists are like that. Within the context of Dead Space. Like, there's no good uni. There isn't. There just isn't. The entire game series is about how none of them are good. It's wild. Anyway, next chapter. We're almost done. Zip! Chapter 50. Tim was on duty, standing watch at the outer door, when his father appeared. This didn't surprise Tim, apart from the fact that his father had been dead for 20 years and, when alive, had lived several thousand miles away. "Hello, Tim," he said. He was smoking his pipe and wearing the sweater that he had always worn. Well, not always, but a lot. "Dad," he said, "what are you doing here? I came to see you." "You didn't need to do that, Dad. You didn't need to go to the trouble." "I've been worried about you, Tim," he said. "About you and your brother." "Why, Dad? Tom's okay. I'm doing okay, too. We're both working, and we're making good money." "It's not that," said his father, drawing deep on his pipe. "It's just that, well, I don't know how to put this, son, but are you sure that you're ready?" "Ready for what, Dad?" "If you have to ask that, you're not ready, son." "And what about your brother?" "I haven't talked to him about it," said Tim. "I'm not even sure what you're talking about." "Things are going to change around here, son," said his father. "Which team will you be on? Will you be on the winning team? Do you have good hustle?" "I want to be on the winning team, Dad," said Tim eagerly. "I'd like to think I have good hustle." "Your brother? I think he may have dropped out of the game," said his father. "Are you ready to sub for him?" "Tom?" he said, his voice rising. "What happened to Tom?" "I can't rightly say," said his father. "One minute we were talking about and the next moment he wouldn't speak to me. He was listening to the opposing coach at the same time as me. I think he got confused. He was like that when you were kids, too. Tom always did tend to misunderstand what I said." "You won't do that, will you?" "Where's Tom, Dad? Tell me what happened to Tom." But his father was already gone, vanished into thin air. Or maybe he was still there, but right behind him, always just behind him, just out of sight. "Dad?" he said. "Dad?" He paced back and forth anxiously for a moment, but he couldn't stop thinking about Tom. Tom was his older brother, born 9 minutes earlier, and he had always looked up to him. And they had always looked out for each other. It was almost like they weren't a full person unless the other one was there. That together they were two people, but that one of them taken separately wasn't even one. Which was what made guarding the compound door alone so hard sometimes. What was it his dad had said? That Tom had stopped talking. Maybe he was just mad at Dad. Tim didn't understand how you could get mad at Dad. Dad was a great guy, but Tom often had been, and sometimes stopped talking to him. I don't understand that sentence. Maybe that was the part of being the older brother. But maybe it was more than that. Maybe there was something else wrong. He owed it to Tom to check on him. After all, wouldn't Tom have done the same thing for him? And if he didn't do it, and then something turned out to be wrong with Tom, how could he ever manage to forgive himself? There was only the problem of the door. He was guarding the door. He needed someone to watch the door while he was gone. "Dad," he asked, "could you do it?" "Why, sure, son," said his father. He was just lighting his pipe. "What do you want me to do?" "Take this," said Tim, and gave him the gun. His father couldn't hold on to the gun, dropped it to the floor. That was okay, Tim thought. He could pick it up later after he'd finished with his pipe. "If anyone comes," he said, "pump them full of lead." His father grinned. "Will do, son," he said, and gave Tim a little wave. Yes, sir, thought Tim as he headed down the hall in search of Tom. His father was a good egg. That was for certain. He was certainly understanding. Not everybody was lucky enough to have a father like that. He smelled his brother before he saw him, though he didn't know it was his brother at first. All he knew was that he smelled blood, and that it was coming from their room. He went into a crouch and moved in, balanced on the balls of his feet, ready for someone to attack. But the attack never came. His brother was in bed, turned on his side. "Tom," he said to him, "Dad said you weren't talking to him. Is anything wrong?" Tom didn't say anything. "Tom?" he said. Not only did he not say anything, but he didn't even move. Tim moved forward and touched his shoulder. He was cold to the touch. Tim suddenly couldn't breathe. Tim pulled him toward him, and he came all at once, and Tim saw that his throat was cut, and that there was a knife in his hand. Skip-a-dip-bop. All right. So, basically, this is the last chapter, but from Tim's perspective. And it was Tim, not Tom. And it's pretty clear by the end of the chapter why it wasn't Tom. So Tim is hallucinating his father, who apparently was dead and also absent. If the description that he gives of his father when he was alive is anything to go by, it sounds like he wasn't really around a whole lot. But when he was around, he apparently wore a particular sweater a lot and smoked a pipe. Tim is just super jazzed to see his dad. He always liked his dad from the sound of things. Now, Tim's dad starts talking a lot of like weird shit, making like, just being like, "Hey, you got good hustle? Are you ready? You ready, champ?" Just talking about, just like, not even like specifying what it is he's talking about, but talking about like as a fucking sport game, some kind of sports ball, football. And Tim's just like, "I like to think I've got some pretty good hustle." And boy howdy, does he have some good hustle, because he hustles right on out of there when his father's just like, "Yeah, your brother's been talking to the opposing team's coach." Which, is concerning. So, okay. Let's examine this here. So what we're getting here is that the hallucination that Tim is having may or may not be the same hallucination that Tom was having, but the hallucination that Tim is having is aware of the events that transpired in Tom's room when Tom was hallucinating, because he's talking about how Tom killed himself. Explained by him as saying that, like, he was talking to the opposing team's coach, and now he won't talk to their father. It's just, the weird sports metaphor is a little bit difficult to parse at times. But basically, Tom didn't have the same reaction to the marker signal that Tim had, evidently. Apparently. Because Tim is, by all accounts, still alive by the end of this chapter. But Tom dead. Tom dead. He's dead and he's not coming back. I'm imagining, like, their dad in this, like, very stereotypical, like, dad manner. Like, he's probably got, like, the fucking horn-rimmed glasses. Freshly, like, you got, like, a flat top hairstyle, freshly shaved face. A square jaw. He's wearing a sweater, probably some khakis, if I had to guess. Nice pair of shoes. But not a whole lot happens in this chapter otherwise. It's basically just Tim having a conversation with his dead father and then going off and finding, oh shit, Tom killed himself. Whoopsie fucking daisy. And then that's the end of the chapter. Now, of course, during all of this, we know that, like, Altman is fucking booking it out of that facility. And it's not clear... Like, this is the thing. So this is all coming from the marker signal. And this is where we kind of get the sense that this isn't just sort of like random hallucinations. This is coordinated. And we know this for a few reasons, and it's all specifically because of this chapter. So, as we mentioned, Tim's hallucination seems to know what happened with Tom's whole hallucinatory episode. We don't have any way of knowing if Tom specifically saw their father as well, much like Tim did. It wouldn't surprise me if that's the case. Tim kind of goes to great lengths to explain that him and his brother are kind of two halves of a whole. So it would not surprise me if they ended up seeing the same person. But again, it's very clear that because that hallucination seems to know what happened with Tom and is thus actually telling Tim, hey, something's wrong with Tom. That this is not just sort of like a random smattering of hallucinations, but some sort of, like, genuine intelligence that is actively manipulating people. And in this case, it seems like perhaps the goal of the marker was to get Tim away from the door so that Altman could leave. And I mean, in the grand scheme of things, this helps the marker. Because Altman's whole plan is to go public. More people know about the marker, the more people it can influence. So with that, let's go ahead and close out part 5. Sheep. Whoops, I didn't pause the footage. Oh well, it's fine. Chapter 51. Have you seen this? Asked Stevens. Krax was with him, standing just behind. Seen what? Asked Markov. Stevens reached out and opened the vid. It was just broadcast, he said. Still fresh. They stood there, together, watching it. Showed Altman before a podium at a press conference. Tickers on the bottom ran the line, Scientist accuses military of cover-up, and then alien life confirmed? Altman was describing the marker and the expedition. Where is this? Asked Markov. Washington, D.C., he said. How the hell did he get to Washington, D.C.? He turned to Stevens, who in turn looked at Krax. Krax shrugged. Security failure, he said. Not my men, he claimed. Leftovers from Tanner. Every evidence that what we are talking about is the first evidence of alien life, said Altman. This is not something that the military should be investigating. This is something that should be investigated by scientists from all the sectors, a coalition of experts from all over the world. Altman's image disappeared. It was replaced by images of the marker itself, taken from within the underwater chamber. Where the fuck did he get those? Asked Markov. I don't know, said Krax. Find out who does. The military wants to cover it up, Altman was claiming. They want to control the investigation so as to use the alien technology to manufacture weapons. We cannot let this happen. There needs to be a public inquiry about the marker's use and its function. Below him on the ticker were the words, Michael Altman, whistleblower or paranoid? Krax had already started for the door when Markov stopped him. Stevens was speaking to Markov, whispering quietly, both of them just far away enough away that Krax couldn't hear anything. He watched Markov nod, then nod again. Belay that, said Markov to Krax. You can worry about it when you get back. Find out what hotel Altman is staying in, and make whatever arrangements you can to book us into the neighboring room. Handpick 3 additional men. I want all of us on a plane 15 minutes ago. We need to stamp out this problem right now. That's the end. There's a very short chapter. So Altman has gone public with the news of the marker and the military cover-up. He's holding a whole-ass press conference and describing the marker and showing pictures and talking about how, like, the military's covering it up, blah, 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 blah. Markov is understandably upset. And he's looking for somebody to blame, and he's just like, dude, Stevens, Krax, what the fuck? And they're just like, we don't know. Something's happened. It's not my fault. Stop, don't yell at me. But the media that Altman tried to expose this whole conspiracy to is about to kind of be his downfall. Because they went ahead and just kind of planted this tiniest seed of doubt just with a single Chiron message. And as a result, Markov has a plan now. Because the media has given him the idea that perhaps maybe Altman's just being paranoid, you know? And if they had been maybe a little bit more confident in what Altman was saying, maybe none of this would have happened. Maybe we wouldn't have a Dead Space series. But we do, so we know things are about to go poorly. And that is what is going to lead us into part 6 of Dead Space Martyr. Very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very, titled, with the confidence-inspiring name of Hell Unleashed. So I'm sure only good things are going to happen from here on out. I want to thank everybody for coming by the stream. I hope you all had a good time. I know I did. If you enjoyed the stream, you can subscribe here on Twitch. We have special emotes at tiers 1, 2, and 3. Well, no, we don't. We only have emotes at tier 1. So only subscribe at tier 1 until I get some tier 2 and 3 emotes. Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining. Art. Credits are on screen. The stock photo I'm using is by that guy, and it was on that website. My VTuber is done by Audrey & B of Team Catpole, who you can find on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube at Team Catpole, TeamCatple. Don't email? Question mark? Emails unknown. Probably don't email. Just to be safe, don't email. Chalkboard in the recap space. Credits are right there, done by my lovely wife, Natalie, whose work you can find on Twitter at GhostyNaps, GHOSTIENAPS. I will say, today we are celebrating 7 years together. We started dating 7 years ago today, and I can easily remember how long it's been, because our first movie date was Fant Four Stick, which came out in 2015. I will send you images on Twitter all the time now. Fan art on its way. Thank you. Upcoming streams. Wednesday. Gonna be Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. Hopefully gonna have Molly on for that. Molly was not able to join this past week because of planned blackouts by her power company that were only done in poor and elderly areas of the city, and those who were well off were unaffected. So that's cool. That's a good and cool thing they did. And then, starting on Thursday and continuing until Sunday the 26th, I will be participating in Gamers Outreach's VTuber SummerSlam charity event. Tune in on Thursday. I'm pretty sure Thursday is going to be my Shadow the Hedgehog day. I'm going to have some audience participation for people who donate. So tune in for that. What else? Doodle-doo-doo-doo, ba-da-ba-ba-ba-da. And then Friday, I am going to, at this time, what's planned for Friday is that I am going to be joined by Natalie, and we will be playing Halo games. We're going to be finishing the playthrough of Reach we started, just forever ago. And then we will likely finish that and then move on to Halo 1, playing that co-op. So that'll be a lot of fun. Oh, and then on Saturday is going to continue to be Survival Horror Saturday. I will be playing Resident Evil 3, and then upon finishing that, starting Code Veronica. I probably won't finish Code Veronica because I am not as familiar with Code Veronica as I am with Resident Evil 3. And Resident Evil 3 is a very short game, so I know that I can finish it in a couple streams. I will tweet more about what my schedules for those streams are going to look like. I have no fucking clue what I'm going to do on Sunday yet, so stay tuned. What else? At some point, I will be on Team Catpool's stream, probably, or Team Catpool will be on my stream. We are going to be talking about that. Excuse me. And then the week after that is going to be normal stream resumption. You know, Skyward Sword, God of War 3. We'll be starting Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2. And we'll be continuing to read Dead Space Martyr. So I hope you'll tune in for all of that. It's going to be a heckin' good time. With me, a heckin' good boy. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here, and I will see you next time on the Sharkstream. Same shark time, same shark channel. Take care, everybody.